Prohibition and alcohol taxation were deeply intertwined, shaping American fiscal policy and social movements for decades. Before Prohibition, alcohol taxes were a major source of government revenue. By the early 1900s, liquor taxes accounted for nearly 30 to 40% of federal income, making alcohol one of the most heavily taxed commodities in the country. The government had relied on alcohol taxation since the Civil War, when President Abraham Lincoln introduced an excise tax on beer and whiskey to help fund the Union Army. This tax remained in place long after the war ended, becoming a permanent fixture in federal revenue collection. The reliance on alcohol taxes made early prohibition efforts difficult, as banning liquor would mean losing a significant portion of government funding. That makes me think, how many people were drinking and how much back then that this was like 40% of the federal income? I need to look that up. Anyway, however, the passage of the 16th Amendment in 1913, which allowed Congress to levy a federal income tax, changed the equation. With a new source of revenue available, lawmakers no longer depended on alcohol taxes, making prohibition politically feasible. World War I played a role in prohibition's momentum. The Heinz History Center notes that many brewers were of German descent, and the Anti-Salon League used wartime anti-German sentiment to push for alcohol bans. They framed drinking as unpatriotic, further fueling support for prohibition. Let's just stop here for a minute. We just said that alcohol tax was 40% of the government's revenue, which means I don't blame these people. There was probably a lot of drinking going on. I still need to look this up, but I feel that way. Okay. The movement also leveraged fears that alcohol was undermining military readiness, strengthening their argument that a nationwide ban would contribute to national security and stability. Temperance movement, which had been gaining momentum for decades, seized the opportunity. Advocates urged that banning alcohol would reduce crime, improve public health, and strengthen families. The Anti-Salon League and other organizations lobbied aggressively, and by 1919, the 18th Amendment was ratified, prohibiting the manufacturing, sale, and transportation of alcoholic beverages. The Volstead Act passed later that year, providing the legal framework for enforcement. However, prohibition quickly led to unintended consequences. The loss of alcohol tax revenue created financial strain, especially as the country entered the Great Depression. Meanwhile, illegal alcohol production and smuggling flourished, fueling organized crime. Bootleggers and speakeasies became widespread, and enforcement proved difficult. The federal government struggled to replace lost tax revenue, leading to increased reliance on income taxes and tariffs. Prohibition provided the perfect environment for organized crime to thrive, with criminal enterprises stepping in to supply illegal liquor. The Foundation of Economic Education explains that the underground alcohol industry grew into a multi-million-dollar black market controlled by syndicates such as Al Capone's organization in Chicago. Speakeasies, hidden bars that sold illegal alcohol, multiplied by the thousands. Well, yeah, 40%. People were drinking a lot back then. And gangsters made fortunes smuggling liquor from Canada and distilling their own supply. Corrupt law enforcement officers often looked the other way or accepted bribes, further entrenching organized crime. The government, having lost alcohol tax revenue, now faced increased spending to fight illegal liquor operations. Karma. Federal agents raided speakeasies and seized illegal distilleries and pursued bootleggers, but enforcement proved inconsistent and costly. Meanwhile, criminals operated with impunity, using violence to secure control of the black market. The rise of mob-controlled liquor distribution networks made some gangs incredibly powerful, leading to turf wars and high-profile assassinations. Prohibition ultimately backfired. Rather than reducing crime, it empowered organized crime on a massive scale. During Prohibition, the government lost hundreds of millions of dollars in alcohol tax revenue, forcing it to rely more heavily on income taxes. The Foundation for Economic Education explains that the Great Depression further strained federal finances, making the repeal of Prohibition financially necessary. By 1933, income tax revenue had plummeted, and lawmakers saw reinstating alcohol taxes as a way to stabilize the economy, meaning a lot of people still drank. and they were going to use whatever money they had to do it. Talk about exploitation. The Tax Foundation notes that Franklin D. Roosevelt campaigned on repealing Prohibition largely because the government needed new sources of income to fund the New Deal programs. State governments also suffered financially. The Heinz History Center explains that before Prohibition, states relied heavily on alcohol taxes to fund local services. When liquor sales were banned, many states faced budget shortfalls, forcing them to raise other taxes or cut services. Some states attempted to compensate by increasing property taxes and fees on other industries, but this was largely ineffective. I have to say it again, how much were people drinking? Another unintended consequence of Prohibition was the rise in smuggling and tax evasion. The Foundation for Economic Education highlights how bootleggers avoided paying taxes on illegal alcohol sales, depriving the government of revenue while fueling organized crime. The rapid growth of speakeasies and underground distilleries meant alcohol was being produced and consumed on a massive scale, but none of it contributed to federal or state tax revenues. The enforcement of Prohibition became a financial liability. The government was spending resources to fight illegal alcohol, but it wasn't bringing in tax revenue that had once funded those enforcement efforts. In the early 1930s, the economic impact of Prohibition became undeniable. The Great Depression had devastated federal income tax collections, and lawmakers began reconsidering the ban on alcohol. Repealing Prohibition would restore a lucrative tax stream and create jobs in brewing and distilling industries. In 1933, the 21st Amendment was ratified, ending Prohibition and allowing states to regulate alcohol sales. The government quickly reinstated alcohol taxes, which became a crucial part of economic recovery efforts. The Alcohol Tax Unit, part of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, was established to oversee taxation and enforcement. The return of alcohol taxation helped stabilize federal revenue, funding New Deal programs and infrastructure projects. The repeal of Prohibition was not just about personal freedom. It was an economic decision. The return of taxation helped fund New Deal programs, infrastructure projects, and government services. The Alcohol Tax Unit, later part of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, was established to oversee taxation and enforcement. One of the lesser-known consequences of Prohibition repeal was the decline of major criminal enterprises that had thrived on liquor smuggling. Many mobsters shifted operations towards other illegal activities, but the removal of the alcohol black market did weaken their financial grip on urban economies. The repeal of Prohibition marked a turning point in American tax policy. It demonstrated the government's reliance on excise taxes and the unintended consequences of eliminating a major revenue source. Today, alcohol taxes remains a significant part of federal and state budgets, funding public health initiatives and regulatory enforcement. The legacy of Prohibition continues to influence tax policy, shaping debate over regulation and revenue generation. The historical connection between alcohol taxation and government funding underscores the complex relationship between fiscal policy and social movements. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. I'll see you next time.